Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Great to be back with you today. As you all know, I've been, or you may or may not know, I think I've announced this last week, but I've been on the road for quite a few days. I was in North Carolina at Indian Trail at First Baptist Church of Indian Trail with Pastor Mike Whitson. Great congregation, had a great time there last week, and then went out to Andrew Womack Ministries, spoke at Caris for a men's meeting there, and then left there and went to my granddaughter's birthday party. So I've been on the road for almost a week now. In fact, it is exactly a week because I left a week ago today. But I'm back in my own studio today, and where do I start? I've got some really important stuff to say to you today. But before I do that, I want to remind you that, and I should be, you all have to forgive me, but I've got a lot on my plate. But anyway, I will be at the Black Conservative Summit in Chicago, Illinois, next Friday and Saturday. In fact, I'm speaking the closing message there. It's going to be at the Convention Center at Tinley Park. It's going to be, I think it starts Thursday night, goes all day Friday, and into about late afternoon on Saturday when I'll be speaking and closing it out. That's in Chicago, Illinois. I'll be there next Saturday, March the 25th. Hope to see you there. Next Saturday, March the 25th, the Black Conservative Summit at Tinley Park Convention Center. And again, I'll be there all day long, but I believe I'm speaking somewhere around 3 o'clock, if I am not mistaken, somewhere around 3 o'clock. And then I'll be speaking at New Beginnings Church in Chicago, Illinois, at 6620 South King Drive in Chicago on next Sunday morning. So got a busy week this week, too, at least toward the weekend. So I wanted to let you know that. You can find out about that at our website, standamerica.us. And if, by the way, if something I've just announced to you is not there, please email me at ewjackson@ewjackson.com and say I couldn't find the information on your speaking engagements this weekend, and we'll make sure that it's posted. Again, folks, I don't have a big staff, and we got a lot to do. So from time to time, everything may not be updated, but we will get to it if it's not. I haven't looked to see. I want to remind you, my new book, Sweet Land of Liberty, Reflections of a Patriot Descended from Slaves. Now, folks, this is the message the left doesn't want to hear. They don't want to hear from a black patriot. They don't want to hear from an American of African ancestry who loves this country. They don't want to hear from someone who can expound on the true meaning and understanding of slavery in America. And I'm a descendant of slaves. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother were slaves in Orange County, Virginia. I can speak to this issue authentically and about a whole bunch of other issues as well. This, frankly, folks, is a book about America. It's a book about saving our country. It's a book about, and by the way, folks, this is no light book. This is a serious book. It's a serious tome. Okay? This book is about saving our country. And so I hope that you will take advantage of it. Use it in your Sunday school class. Use it in your Christian education school class. Preachers, you'll find plenty of preaching material in here. I'm telling you, you'll find plenty. This is not a book about Christianity, but it is a Christian book in the sense it is written by a Christian and it comes to you from a biblical perspective, okay, on everything concerning our country. Now, the two ways you can buy it. You can buy it wherever books are sold, of course. You can also buy it at my publisher's website. That is faithfultext.com. Faithfultext.com. Or you can go and join as a Patriot partner, and you can buy the book at our website, standamerica.us. That's standamerica.us. Sign up as a Patriot partner with a gift of $25 or more. I'll send you a free, signed, numbered copy of my book, Sweet Land of Liberty, Reflections of a Patriot Descended from Slaves. And thank you all for all the books that that you have purchased and all the books that are selling. I believe in God that this is going to be a national bestseller because I really believe that it's a book that every American ought to read. I think that it is a book that will, forgive me folks, my mic has gotten a little loose here. That's what happens when you're your own producer. It is a book, I think, that will help unify the country if we can get the entire country to read it, and I mean that. So when I was at Andrew Womack Ministries at Indian Trail, a lot of people bought multiple books to give to their friends, to give to their family members. I would urge you to do exactly the same. Buy as many books as you can afford to buy, and then distribute them to people and ask them to read it. Get it and read it yourself first, so that I just got a text from a friend of mine yesterday. Let me see if I hope it was a text. Let me see if I can find it real quick. And it was, yeah, here we go. Here we go. He said, Bishop, finished your book last night. It's a wonderful, and yes, the gospel is the answer to all that troubles us, and it needs to be in the hands of every liberal. And then he mentions the city he lives in. He says, we are X% black here, and your book should be required reading. And then it ends it with a prayer. Father, please send your spirit and give people wisdom and discernment as they promote, as Bishop Jackson promotes your word in a hurting world. So, folks, those who read it are finding that the book has an impact and want others to read it as well. So I hope that you will help me in getting the book out there. I'm believing God that some wealthy donor will just buy 10,000 of the books and just say, hey, just give them away. Just make sure that they get into people's hands. And we will, believe me, we will happily do that. Okay. Today I want to discuss something with you, folks, that goes to the heart of where we are as a country. And again, it's something that I don't hear any presidential candidate talking about, and they all need to be talking about it, but they probably don't have an understanding of it, which is why they're not talking about it. We are witnessing a communist takeover of our country. Now, let me quickly add, I'm not talking about people who are members of the Communist Party, okay? I'm not saying that the Communist Party officially is at some nefarious work. I have no doubt that the Communist Party of America is enjoying what they see going on right now. But I'm not saying that. I'm getting to a more Antonio Gramsci type takeover of the country. And remember, Karl Marx is the founder of communism. Antonio Gramsci is perhaps his greatest disciple. Antonio Gramsci broke from Karl Marx, or shall we say, he spun from Karl Marx a new view of how communism can take over. And his theory is that communism can take over a country not necessarily with violent revolution, but with a revolution within, a nonviolent revolution, which he called subverting the nation's cultural hegemony, meaning that the way you take over the country is you subvert the cultural values and norms of the nation, and you replace those with a new set of values so that the country transforms itself from within. And so what communists have to do, or leftists or Marxists, you call them what you will, is they have to get into every institution of influence, and they have to flip that institution so that it governs itself by a different set of values, and the values that are the ones that have propelled the nation into prosperity and the ones that make the nation free. Now that's Antonio Gramsci's theory of subverting cultural hegemony of a nation. And folks, that is exactly what is going on in our country. So let me give you a couple of examples. And first of all, let me again lay out the theory. America is a free nation, and we understand that freedom is only individual. Freedom, by definition, is not collective. It is individual. Because you see, here's the distinction. See, Marx would say, right? Karl Marx would say, we're liberating people, right? We're liberating people. We're liberating the masses. We're liberating the proletariat. But what he really means by that is we are taking a group of people, a class of people, the workers, the proletariat, and we are placing them into a certain context and requiring of them certain behavior, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of behaving. Excuse me, folks. And because that is what our understanding of life requires. Because remember, Karl Marx's theory of life is all life boils down to class warfare. Now, it's class warfare not between one individual and another individual. It's class warfare between one group and another group. So on this side, you've got the proletariat, the workers. On this side, you've got the bourgeoisie, or the owners of the means of production. And in some cases, he would include the small business people and upper middle class people and affluent people, call them the petty bourgeoisie. They're really they've allied themselves with the bourgeoisie. They don't realize that that's not in their best interest, but nevertheless, there they are in that group. So you got really these two broad groups of people, right? The individuals don't matter. What matters is the collective. Now, the reason why liberty can't be collective is that when somebody places you in a box and says, okay, you are part of this group, you must think this way, you must speak this way, you must act this way, you must hold these values, and you must see this group as your enemy. That is how you are defined. And then you say to this other group, you are evil, you are bad, you are wrong, you must think a new way, you must act a new way, you must speak a new way. And we are going to take from you everything that propped you up in that old way of life, that old way of thought, that old way of speech. And we are going to demand of you a new way of speech, a new way of life, a new way of thinking. That's not freedom. It's not freedom, folks. Because true freedom lies in every individual being able to think and speak and act under their own volition. So did you notice how what I just laid out for you, which is sort of the Marxist view, how quickly you can transport that right into today's racial politics? You take all quote unquote black folks or people of color, as they like to frame it, but as I've often said, I've never met a person without color. Have you? Every person I've ever met has color. But what they really mean is people of darker skin complexions, darker colors, versus people of lighter colors, particularly if you are of European ancestry without any black or Indian or mixed race heritage. Okay, that's what they really mean. So remember, if you look like you are of European background, but you've got a black grandfather, grandmother, father, mother, then you are still black. So you're over in this group not because that's where you must be biologically or genetically, but because that's where cultural norms have put you. First by racists who would say, well, if you got any one drop of black blood, you're black. And now by leftists who want to take advantage of putting you into a group that they can say, well, you're a part of the oppressed group and you're part of this. So now you've got to think this way. You've got to act this way. You've got to believe this way. You've got to speak this way. Are you getting my point? That's not freedom. It's not liberty. Because what you are told is you are defined by your placement in this group. And you are supposed to think the way this group thinks. You're supposed to act the way this group acts. You're supposed to speak the way this group speaks. And if you don't, you will be punished. Either in hard ways, as communist countries do, which is they put you in a gulag, they put you in a re-education camp, which is really, for all intents and purposes, nothing but a slave labor camp, and a torture camp or imprisonment, or they kill you. And very often they not only imprison you, but they imprison your whole family or they threaten to kill your whole family in order to get you to think the way you're supposed to think and speak the way you're supposed to think and act the way you're supposed to act. And people over here in the bourgeoisie, when you lost all that you had because they've taken it from you, then they tell you either you transfer over to this group and start thinking the way you're supposed to think and speaking the way you're supposed to think and acting the way you're supposed to act, or we put you in a gulag, we put you in a concentration camp, we put you in a prison, we torture you, and we kill you. And by the way, not only you, but your family as well. That's what happened in communist China. That's what happened in North Vietnam. That's what happened that's what happened in Vietnam. That's what happened in North Korea. That's what happened in the Soviet Union. It always happens because they've got to get the collective to think of themselves as one and to conform to the way they're supposed to think in order to effect this so-called revolution. You see how easily race serves this role in America? So you take all, quote unquote, people of color, as they put it, and you put them in this box and you say, you're supposed to think this way, you're supposed to speak this way, you're supposed to act this way, and you're supposed to believe these things. And they take all, quote unquote, white people and they put them in a box and say, you're an oppressor, you're evil, you're bad, you're wrong, and you better start identifying with this group over here or we will punish you as well. Now, in America, punishing you means you might lose your job, you might lose your business, you might lose your reputation, be vilified, be shunned. In Hollywood, you might lose your job opportunities, your acting opportunities. In the corporate world, you might be kicked out of your job because they found out that you're a Bible-believing Christian. You don't believe in abortion. You don't believe that marriage can be anything but a union between one man and one woman. You believe there are only two genders. We must get rid of you. So you see, that's not liberty. That's not freedom. Because true liberty means I can say, well, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but I really believe that marriage is a union between one man and one woman. In which society says, well, you're free. You have a right to believe however you want to believe. Because that doesn't affect how you do this job. That doesn't affect your skill, doesn't affect your ability. And you are hired, or I could bring you my business on the basis of your ability to do the job. Maybe I don't agree with you, but you're not going to hold that against me, and I'm not going to hold it against you, because that has nothing to do with business. That has nothing to do with our economic transactions. Now, here's what I ultimately wanted to get to. Now, that's true liberty, but that's not what the left is going for. That's not what the Democrat Party is going for. The Democrat Party is going for a totalitarian state. Now, let me be very honest about this, folks. Let me be really clear about this, because I want you to understand this, because I don't want you to sort of fly off the handle or think that I'm talking tinfoil hat stuff. I really don't believe that even many of these elite Democrats, the big donors, the top officials, I really don't believe that most of them are well educated enough to know that that's where they're taking the country. I think they have been indoctrinated, they've been inculcated with these really foreign and dangerous, these poisonous ideas, but they've been sold these ideas on the basis that they're being true, they're being just, they're being compassionate, they're being caring, they're being concerned. Well, Marx said the same thing, basically. He was saving people, right? Liberating people. They think they're liberating people. They don't realize that they're playing from Karl Marx's playbook. They don't realize that they're following the Communist Manifesto. They don't realize that they're following Antonio Gramsci. But some do. I pointed out to you before that Pete Buttigieg's father, Joseph Buttigieg, was a confirmed communist. He taught at Notre Dame University for over 40 years. Nobody ever called him out on it. But he founded the International Antonio Gramsci Society and praised Antonio Gramsci's communist thinking. So the man was a communist. Now, he may have never come out and said to anybody, I'm a communist. He might not have even thought of himself as a communist. I don't know. But you can't be an admirer of Antonio Gramsci and found the Antonio Gramsci International Society and not be a communist. I mean, you are de facto a communist. even if you not, even if you're not a communist de jure with a communist carrying card or membership card, or having taken an oath or joined the Communist Party at any point, you are de facto a communist. That's what frames your thinking. And I think Pete Buttigieg is cut from the same cloth. I think Pete Buttigieg is another one. Now, so let me explain something that's very important for you to get. There are some elites, I think, who know exactly what they're doing, but I think most people do not know what they're doing. And so they do not understand that this collectivist thinking is taking us toward the end of personal liberty, which is why when Antonio Gramsci's theory was you have to get in and you have to take over the cultural values of a nation, communist theory was always you take over everything. Okay, everything. The party owns and controls everything. Well, they don't call it ownership, but they control everything. Do you see what's happening in our country today? There was a time in our country when politics was here and the rest of life was over here. And nobody was thinking about politics when you went to the movies. Nobody was thinking about politics when you went to a ball game. Nobody was thinking about politics when you went to work. Nobody was thinking about politics in math, in science. Nobody was thinking, I'm sending my child to school to be inculcated with a certain political view. Now, you certainly hope that in saying the Pledge of Allegiance and singing the national anthem that we created some kind of cultural unity around which we could congeal as a nation. But you weren't going to any of these institutions expecting to hear a left-wing message or right-wing or any message. Just going. You go to a ball game to enjoy the ball game. You go to a football game, baseball game, basketball. You just go to enjoy the game. Communism's raison d'etre is you must take over everything. Man, let me say that again. Communism's raison d'etre is you must take over everything. You must control everything. You see what's happening in our country today? Do you see what's happening in our country today? Entertainment, sports, the corporate world, with the financial world. Aside from the corporate world, banking was always considered to be separate and sort of, this specialized profession that helps us manage and keep our money safe. The Silicon Valley Bank gave $73 to $74 million to Black Lives Matter. They boasted about having the first openly homosexual man, Barney Frank, who is a moral sewer. I mean, Barney Frank is a truly degenerate individual. I've known of him since my days in Massachusetts. He was a moral sewer then. He remained a moral sewer. I mean, this is a guy who was running a brothel out of his apartment or condo or whatever it was in Washington, D.C. Some homosexual he was living with was actually doing sex trade out of the man's apartment. He claimed not to know it. He's a liar. He knew it because he's part of it. That's who he is. When I was in Massachusetts, he was one of the people pushing to lower the age of consent between children and adults having sex. That was one of the things that awakened me to the fact that I could not remain a Democrat, that these people were anti-God. And I remember watching him sort of slither around. And I do mean that, but because I always thought he was sleazy back then. And I was a Democrat then, and I thought he was sleazy. But they boast about having him on the board. Apparently, the only they only had one person on their entire board who was a banker. Everybody else was political. Everybody else was into the wokeness. The $5 billion investment in climate change. They actually, Signature Bank, which has also failed, their CEO led the seminar in what proper pronouns you should use to deal with gender confused people. And by the way, I've made a decision, as I have in other instances, in terms of changing my vocabulary. I will no longer use the term transgender because there's no such thing. You can't go from being a man to being a woman. It's impossible. You can't go from being a woman to being a man. It's impossible. These people need to be referred to as GCs, gender confused. They're not transitioning to anything. They're just confused. And they're mutilating their bodies and injecting themselves with hormones and all this craziness, trying to do the impossible because you cannot violate the biological and the genetic and the physiological imperative. All you can do is mutilate a person's body and just further mess them up. They're already messed up in their minds. Now you're going to mess up their bodies as well. These people are just gender confused. And it's a sickness. But the whole culture wants you to celebrate it, because one of the things that communism was committed to doing was tearing down the traditional family. Are you seeing what I'm... See, I think most Christians do not understand what's going on around them. Indeed, most Americans don't understand. It really is a case of the frog in the kettle, and you turn the water up slowly, and you don't realize it's boiling until it roasts you, until it boils you to death. And you just think about this, that everything in the culture is being infected with this politics, the politics of the left. Of course, now we've got 2 bank failures, and both of these banks were very high on ESG, environmental social governance, but very low apparently on their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and their customers. Well, see, because Marxism doesn't care. It is only interested in taking over and controlling everything and everybody. And it doesn't care whether people lose money. It doesn't care whether individuals are hurt in the process, because, as I started out this saying, individuals don't matter. Which is why there's a big push on the left right now from the Democrat Party to say, no. The First Amendment is antiquated, and you shouldn't be allowed to say things that involve hate speech. But you know what? Everything I've just said from the left's point of view would be hate speech. Everything I've just said, YouTube, Facebook, I trust no longer Twitter, but the things I've just said to you, that I hope you've heard me back up with facts. Does anybody doubt that sports has been taken over by leftist politics? Does anybody doubt that the corporate world's been taken over by leftist politics? I mean, we're witnessing it right before our eyes. You can't say, oh, he's crazy. I mean, that's not happening. Everybody knows it's happening. Does anybody doubt that the entertainment culture, when the guy who won the Oscar for Best Picture, everything about everything all at once, is some stupid mess, got up there and lectured us about how drag queen time for children is a wonderful thing, and he was a drag queen kid and it was great. Does anybody doubt that everything is being taken over by this insidious Marxist collectivist political movement? Of course it is. Nobody can look at it objectively and say, oh no, that's not happening. Everybody knows it's happening. So look, what you and I have got to do is we've got to stand up against this stuff. And you know what? It hit me. We're going to suffer some pain in doing so. This is not going to be easy. We'll win, but people are going to lose their jobs. People are going to have their businesses hurt. It's going to be up to us to rally behind people who are taking a stand to try to minimize the hurt. Because, see, the left is vicious. You and I are not interested in destroying anybody. You told me Silicon Bank was infected with all this wokeness. I wouldn't say, well, you know what, I hope they lose all their money. I hope the bank, now that's what's happening. I don't think they're going to lose all their money, because Joe Biden's going to come along and make everybody whole, because he's got all these leftists that he's got to look out for. But I wouldn't say, I hope they all go down in flames. I hope they all get destroyed, because you and I aren't The only thing we're interested in destroying is the works of the devil. We're not interested in destroying people. But they are, because Marxism is. Marxism, and I read something this morning, and I think I'll end on this. Forgive me, I should attribute this to the author, but what he said, because I don't remember who it was. It might have been Nolte of Breitbart, but he said there's a reason why DEI begins with the first three letters of the word deity, because these people think they're gods. And I thought, wow, that's a brilliant point. I mean, you know, it's cute, but I think he's right on substance. They really do think they're gods. They think that they're so much above the rest of us that they should be able to dictate to the rest of us how we think, how we speak, and how we act, because after all, they know so much better than we do what is good and what is right. But that's what communists have always believed, which is why they think it's no big deal to kill people in the quest for this utopia that you're creating, which is why communism is responsible for 100 million deaths around the world. Everywhere it's been tried, it leads to mass murder. Because you've got people like me who won't go along. And those people who won't go along are getting in the way of this wonderful life you're creating for everyone else. Well, there is no God, there is no morality, so if you kill them, you're doing a service. I hope this has been helpful for you in thinking about where we are right now. See, this is the kind of thing everybody in America ought to hear what I just said. See, because I think most Americans don't go along with this stuff, but they don't know what to do about it. So part of what we got to do is we have got to speak up everywhere we find this stuff, and it is going to cause us some pain because the people we're up against don't care about hurting you. Now, thank God in America there's enough of a Judeo-Christian value system and I guess enough of objectivity in our criminal justice system that they can't get away yet with killing you and basically being patted on the back by the powers that be for having done the world a service, which is what happens in communist countries. But I'll tell you what, we keep going down this road. The day will come when that's exactly the way they'll have it, because that's exactly what happens in every so-called revolution where people get caught up in all that we must do for the people and the fact that we've got to get rid of anybody who's in the way. That's why the tool of the French Revolution was the guillotine. It was a wonderful instrument for removing the obstacles to the wonderful France that Robespierre wanted to create. So, folks, as I always say, as we end this program, and it's still true, and forgive me because I'm going to give you some other substantive things that we can do, but this really encapsulates it in my view. We've got to stand up, we've got to step up, we've got to speak up, and we've got to refuse to back up. And we do all this knowing that we cannot be defeated if we will not quit, because we are on God's side.